So, Iran blocked 20% of the world's oil trade by threatening to blow up oil tankers that dare transit through the Strait of Hormuz. So, the US just responded over the weekend by announcing its own blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. At which point, one way to look at that is the way this writer at the New York Post sees it. A brilliant call, like saying, you block the strait, I block your block. Now, there may be two ways of looking at this, as the Jerusalem Post put it. Is this 3D chess or grasping at straws? Grasping, because this war has now dragged on for a month and a half. And peace talks, the vice president's most recent attempt in Pakistan to end the war, they seem to have gone nowhere.
So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement.
But let me offer a third way of looking at this, which is that this new US blockade represents an escalation in the war of a very different sort than we've seen so far. That it injects a new kind of risk, more than one, actually. And we can understand that risk by starting with what a blockade would actually look like. So step one to understanding what a US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz looks like is sorting through Trump's own contradictions about it. Peace talks between the US and Iran collapsed over the weekend, with Trump's VP saying this about Iran.
The simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term. We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will.
Now, Trump expands on this news by saying, so there you have it, the meeting went well, most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. Now, at first blush, this didn't really make any sense, because if Trump's most urgent goal has been to reopen the strait, why block, quote, any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz? It's like the geopolitical equivalent of telling your boss, you can't fire me because I quit, which is fine, but it doesn't get your job back. So thankfully, the next day, we got this clarification. The United States to blockade ships entering or exiting Iranian ports on April 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And U.S. Central Command would confirm a blockade of all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports, and including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. So, okay, the US isn't blocking Saudi tankers exporting their oil to China. It's specifically choking off Iran's ports, which is effectively telling them, if you block the world's oil, we block yours. But do you know how many ports Iran has? The country has almost 2,000 kilometers of coastline leading to the Arabian Sea, which means a blockade of Iran's ports doesn't just mean sealing the Strait of Hormuz. It means preventing ship access here. I count 5 ports just in this 20-kilometer span. It also means blocking ships coming out of this bay. I see ports with boats here, 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 here. And you know what you'll find as you head even further east? Yeah, more ports.
And so the question is, how many ships are actually going to leave Iranian ports? Are the US forces going to be able to track them? All of these are, no pun intended, but, uncharted waters.
So the first challenge is building the wall. Not so hard when you're just blockading one port, even 2. You can choke off near or, let's say, far. But as you widen the area you're blockading, you have to keep making that net wider and wider, or else you risk creating weaknesses where ships, can slip through. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't doable for the world's strongest navy. I'm just saying it's an investment.
But ultimately, you're going to need to monitor every one of those ports with ISR platforms, drones, Predator, and other aircraft that we flying overhead. But not just having eyes on the ports, you need to be able to have the capability to respond. That requires naval assets, everything from ships to frigates to helicopters and elsewhere. So that's going to be the challenge.
But then you have to ask the question, what happens when there's a point of contact?
When you blockade a strait, you basically threaten ships to stop, and if they don't stop, they would potentially be boarded or fired upon.
Any vessel that's going to try and break the blockade is going to face what's called the Visit Board Search and Seizure, VBSS operation, that can be carried out by the Naval Special Operations Forces that are trained for this.
So you have American forces stretched across a wider area, engaging not in black and white warfare, but in a potential series of encounters with lots of gray. An Iranian warship approaches. Maybe the US blows it out of the water. But what if it's a Russian or Chinese or Indian tanker? Do you threaten? Do you attack? Do you board? And while that encounter plays out, what's Iran doing? Watching? Intervening?
There is a legal and geopolitical challenge if intercepting vessels linked to major powers like China. What is the United States going to do? Is it going to cease? It's going to be not letting these ships go. So that can lead to escalation beyond Iran. So the enforcement becomes selective and that creates loopholes.
But the other concern I've seen raised about this new chapter of the war against Iran in the Middle East is how this blockade represents a very open-ended commitment to putting American troops in harm's way.
Deployment orders are never specific. They're always open-ended. So that is unfortunately the reality, especially considering the fact that right now the U.S. Navy is the only one shouldering the burden to enforce this blockade on Iran right now.
There are no clear objectives. There are no desired outcomes that are specific, and they seem to be changing all the time. So in this particular case, when you ask me how long will it last, I have no idea, because the administration does not have any idea.
The point here being that you don't just do a blockade in the same way that you do an airstrike. An airstrike has a predetermined endpoint. The strike happens, then it's over. Even a whole series of airstrikes can have a clear goal. Destroy these military bases, destroy these leadership compounds, destroy these bridges. But a blockade, you don't do a blockade, you maintain one. That's a 24/7 operation with military support, with mine-clearing operations, as Trump has explicitly called for now, and with no clear implicit success condition. Because when does the blockade end? It goes until something fundamentally changes at some unspecified future date, or it won't, because what the Trump administration says it's waiting for is for Iran to abandon not just its nuclear program, but its nuclear ambition, something even J.D. Vance admits he only hopes will happen.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
Now, Vance may be right on that count. The economic hit to Iran, if its oil tankers can't deliver oil, figures to be nearly 2 million barrels a day. At the fresh highs of over $100 US per barrel of oil on world markets, that's more than $100 million of product every day that isn't bringing foreign dollars into the country. But if Iran's oil stops getting out, that affects the global supply and therefore the global price of oil. That'll get squeezed even further. The price of fuel, even as far away as North America, may very well go higher. And this blockade will be the most recent sign that despite weeks of attacks, assassinating Iran's leaders, bombing its defenses, destroying its infrastructure, that even on those dire terms, Iran refuses to give the US what it wants. Diplomacy has failed, and the war rages on.